Hi, Judy from the Bungalow. Today I'm going to give you the basics for making this fun beer caddy. I was tired of people always having wine caddies that were beautiful, but nobody ever makes anything for beer. And so many people love to drink craft beers. They make great gifts for a 6-pack. So stick around and we're going to show you the basics of how to make this. You're going to need the pattern because I'm not going to include the measurements in this video. I want to give you the basic construction points so that you can make this yourself without any difficulty. All right, you're going to cut your pieces of cardboard all to the correct sizes, nice and neat. Have them all ready. And you're going to cut all your fabric rectangles to the correct size. The first one the longest pieces of fabric that you're cutting, the longest rectangles, get sewn wrong sides together, starting on one end with a 1/2 inch seam allowance on one end. And then you make a vertical line and you cut or you stitch on that line, another vertical line, stitch, another vertical line, stitch, and then the last one. Now from here over, you're going to allow a 1/2 inch and you're going to cut it off along here. Then, as in the directions, you are going to apply woven fusible interfacing to the one rectangle that requires it. And this is going to be for the bottom. All right, now I have cut that edge off and I have my long rectangles with my divisions, which are according to the pattern. Those amounts are in the pattern. Now I'm going to take these two edges here, the short edges, and I'm going to stitch them together like this, right along that seam. Cut off all my loose threads, but I'm going to stitch right along here. Okay, now I've sewn it together here, and it looks like a tube, all right? I took a pinking shears and I pinked that edge. Now, on one of the two sides, it doesn't matter which one, you're going to stitch a 1/2 inch seam allowance all along one edge. All along one edge, all the way around, you're going to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, now that you've done that, you've sewn that 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around one end. This, where the pinked seam is, this is now the inside of your beer caddy. So that's the inside. This is going to be the outside here. All right, so I'm taking one of the rectangles that in the pattern it says is supposed to be interfaced. Now this is going to be sewn, pinned and sewn to the edge that you stitched closed, right? So you can see kind of where we're going with this because we've got these little pockets in here, these little pockets, and then this is stitched closed. And now we're going to use this piece. What I've done was I've stitched a 1/2 inch around the perimeter, the entire perimeter of this rectangle, because that allows me to be able to then match up the corners with the corners on here. So I'm going to put it like this because I want the inside of my beer caddy, oh, that's the wrong side. You're going to put it right sides together. So this is the wrong side. That's the inside of your beer caddy. And the bottom on the inside is going to be covered up with another piece. So you're going to find the corner where the seam here is, and you're going to pin your rectangle, right sides together. Then when you get to this next, where you stitch the edge of the pocket, you're going to put the corner of this to that. Now, if it's a little bit of extra fabric there, because it's stretched maybe in the process of stitching it, don't worry, we can certainly ease that in. We're going to put a pin in the corner, because this is where you're going to pivot. You're going to pivot there, and then you're going to sew this to this edge. See, we're going to go all the way around like that. We're going to ease those edges in. which means that that's going to be where my feed dogs are. That'll be on the bottom with the feed dogs. And then we're going to turn, pivot, stitch, and continue that way. So we're going to stitch the bottom rectangle on so that we have a bottom to this little box. We're kind of making a box. So keep going all the way around, and we're going to pivot in those points. Okay, so now that I've sewn that bottom piece on, I have this nice little box, and I used the pivot points on the square or the rectangle when I sewed around it. And you had to ease some of this in a little bit, so this part doesn't look perfect. But by the time you set that piece, the cardboard piece in that goes into here, it's going to look really great. It really is. So don't worry if it doesn't look perfect right now along your bottom. Don't worry, it's going to turn out to be really nice. So now you can see that you've got the long rectangle sewn to the rectangle to create that little box. All right. So then the next step is where it's going to really start looking like it's taking good shape. Now the next step is to insert our cardboard pieces. All right, so we're going to insert our longer cardboard pieces into our longer sides, which would be here. And here. This is the shorter one, the shorter side. Here. We're going to make sure that they're pushed all the way down in. Push them all the way down in, because you need to have a fold. You need to be able to fold this over, because this gets glued down with a piece of trim. Here, it gets glued down with a piece of trim. And here. All right, so then we're going to push it down nice and tight so that it looks good, nice and taut. And then we're going to get some good old Elmer's glue. And we're going to glue this down all the way around. And you're going to put clamps on it and leave it sit until it's dry. So you're going to glue this down with Elmer's glue or some type of craft glue, okay? Making sure that this is all the way down inside there, nice and taut. And then you're going to put trim, like grosgrain ribbon or something, around. You're going to glue that over that so that that raw edge is not showing. Okay, so that's the next step. You can see that I've put Elmer's glue on the inside edge and then folded this down tight, and I've got clothespins all around so that it holds it and it'll get nice and it'll dry, and then I can put my grosgrain ribbon around on the inside. And then we're going to work on the bottom piece, and we're also going to work on the dividers while we're waiting for the glue to dry. While we're waiting for the glue to dry on the other piece, we're going to take the center, the rectangle that is meant for the dividers in the beer caddy, and we are going to fold it so that it reflects thirds. So we're going to fold it so that it is in thirds, and we're going to press. All right, so you don't need to even do any measurements, just fold it so that it is in thirds. And then we're going to press so that those 1/3 marks are meant to be for marking where you're going to cut. You really only need to do it on one, because you're going to be stitching this now right sides together. All right, we're going to sew it right sides together. We're going to sew 1/4 inch along this side, up here, and down this side. Okay, now we're going to take the next longest rectangle that you've cut, and we're going to fold it right sides together and stitch 1/4 inch down this side and down this side. Make sure you're back stitching on the edges of all of these pieces. Okay, so now I've made this little pocket by folding that right sides together and stitching down the sides. And so this is the bottom. This goes inside the bottom of your caddy. This gets slid over the cardboard. Now at this point, once you slide this over the cardboard, you could, and this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to fold this under like this and this all the way around, and I'm going to stitch with an invisible stitch, like an invisible stitch that you use for a binding. That's what I'm going to do rather than glue it, although you could glue it. If you glue, I always use craft glue or Elmer's glue. A hot glue gun will make it lumpy. It'll just look lumpy and it won't look good. So what I'm going to do though is I'm going to invisibly stitch this, and then I'm going to insert it down inside the box once the glue is dry from holding those edges down. Okay, now that this is all dry, I'm going to put the bottom down inside of the main box, and it'll cover up all those raw edges from sewing the bottom onto the sides. All right, that'll stay down there tucked in real nice. And then I'm going to glue the grosgrain ribbon around here so that those raw edges are covered. So you could use grosgrain ribbon, you can use, you know, bias tape, whatever you want to use, and just glue it in there. Glue it in there so that that's nice and clean. The edges are clean, then clip all those little threads off of there. You're still going to have just this one pinked edge on the inside here, which is fine. And make sure when you do this that your corners are really pushed down well, so that you don't have gaps at the corner, gaps in the ribbon at the corner. But just glue this all the way down around. Use clothespins or clips of some sort to hold it down there, and then let it dry. Okay, doing the dividers is probably the part that takes the most finesse with this whole project. So I have my divider cardboard pieces here, and I've measured from the bottom up 2.5 inches and 2.5 inches, and then the same thing on the center divider. All right, so I'm going to set those aside, and then here are my pieces of fabric that are going to cover those. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to sew them right sides together on 3 sides. So with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and leave one side open. Make sure you back stitch on those edges, because you're going to be putting the cardboard in and out of there, and it's going to need to be have a nice edge on it that won't come apart. And then this one as well, and this one as well. The small divider coverings, they will be right sides together, and you will stitch 1/4 inch seam allowance on 3 sides, and then you can clip those little corners off afterward. Okay, so now I have stitched these on 3 sides, and then I folded it in half to find the center, and made a line in the center, and we're going to stitch around that line and then clip so that there's a little bit of an opening, so that when we slide these in, they will intersect with these to make the kind of divider that beer holders have. This one got divided into thirds, and I've created my lines here, and I'm going to stitch around it and then clip. Now, when I say stitch around the lines, I'm not going to go a full 1/4 inch around the lines. I'm going to just do a little bit away from there, maybe 3/16 of an inch around there, not a full 1/4. This is going to, like I said, take adjustment. This is something that when you cut this and then you cut this and you slide it inside, sometimes you need to make adjustments. It's not as straightforward as, you know, first time you do it, you're going to get it right. So let's stitch those guides here for where the openings are supposed to be. All right, so now I've stitched up around that line, and I'm going to clip. Now you see that wasn't a full 1/4 inch on both sides of that line. It was less than that. And I'm going to clip, and I'm going to clip up into the little corner. Don't clip the threads. All right, I'll do that on all of these. And then we're going to cut our cardboard the same distance. And we're going to have to cut out a little bit of the cardboard. We can't just cut a slot in the cardboard. We have to actually cut it out by just a little bit. But when you cut your cardboard, don't use your sewing scissors. Use a junk scissors for sure, or some type of a craft knife. Now I'm going to cut my cardboard. I'm going to cut a little bit over from that line, just a little. I'm using my junk scissors, for sure I'm using my junk scissors. Okay, so we're going to start out with just about this much. Like I said, we may have to make adjustments. Once you finish one of these, you're going to understand why it had to be corrugated cardboard as opposed to like Timtex, something like that, which really just doesn't, you just can't hold the weight of 6 beer bottles the way that this can. All right. Okay. Now, these get turned right sides out and pressed. Okay, so these went off without a hitch. These worked out really, really well. The cardboard slid right in, and I didn't have any trouble whatsoever. This one was the one that was a little bit more tricky. Because you're dealing with 3 sections that have to fit exactly, what I ended up having to do was I had to scale or trim the cardboard here a little bit on the sides, and then trim the slits a little bit more to get them to go in. But once I get these into the thing, it's gonna fit wonderfully. It's gonna be great. So the next thing we're gonna do is fold these ends in, and you could glue them at this point, or you could stitch them. I'm gonna stitch them. I'm gonna fold the ends under, and I'm gonna use an invisible like binding stitch and stitch these closed with a needle and thread, because it'll just look neater. You do have to use glue for some parts, but for this, I would like it to look neater, so I'm going to stitch it by hand, of course. If I had an industrial machine, I could probably go right through all the layers, but I'm going to stitch this by hand and get it all neat and tidy. I'm going to do the same thing with the other 2. Okay, now we have a box with dividers. So we're 3/4 of the way there. Now, if there's no real way to make handles to go along the sides here to hold it up. So what we do is we create an outside, like almost like it's just a satchel kind of thing where it comes around here, and then it has the handles on that. So that's what we're going to create next. Now, the big question is, do we do it with the same fabric, which would be cute, or do we do it with a coordinating fabric? Do we do it with something that's a coordinate so that the outside is coordinating? Let's see what I have in my stash, and I'm going to take a look and see what I decide to do. Okay, so I decided to get creative and make the outside wrap a coordinating fabric from this line of fabric. And so this is just a quilted piece rectangle that the measurements, like I said, are in the pattern. And what we're going to do then is to put the handles on the outside of this. And then in order to keep the box from sliding out, it gets wrapped in this direction as well. And that's what makes such a fun beer holder. So once this is completely finished, I will show both of the beer holders that I've done so far. And then you can purchase the pattern on my website, bungalowquilting.com. And hopefully this video will really help you to figure out, all the, even though the pattern's very straightforward, it just helps to kind of see how something is put together. So here it is, and ready to have some great selections of beer added to it. This will keep it in snugly, and it will be just carried with the handles. Perfect, and perfectly strong enough to carry that great 6-pack to your next party.